Rec Room filmmaking is where some people take the plunge into the great career of a director. Some know what to do, some don't know where to start. With that being said, let's make you a better director. Let's finish out what we started, color. So currently we are in Sony Vegas Pro 18, my editor of choice. Today we're going to be going over color grading, color correction, and white balance. First off, at the end of this video we're going to have two separate outputs, one with color correction and one with color grading. You can focus down here, or on this video here. This is what you're actually going to see on YouTube. It's a much darker tone than what it is, because Sony Vegas records this in Studio RGB, while this is sRGB. Quick tip for Sony Vegas users: if you're trying to figure out what your color actually looks like, click this button right here. If you have a second monitor, it'll go to that monitor. If you don't, it should go to your first. So the end result between the two are color correction, grading, correction, grading, correction, grading, correction. There's a lot of difference between the two, so let's go over that. Let's talk about one of the most important things with coloring, white balance. What it does in simple terms, it takes the white that you define, so like the edge of this ice cube, and it sees that it's not perfectly white. So it adjusts the color of the entire frame in the opposite direction of its color. So let's find something that's white. We scroll through our timeline. There's a snare drum there that we all know is reasonably white. So we can click the eyedropper and click on that. You can see now this is a perfect white. This is your start to color grading. There's a lot of differences between color correction and color grading. So let's go over color correction first. Starting with the very first wheel, low. What this does is it adjusts the low colors or the darker colors of your scene. So if you pay attention to over here, you can see that the darker colors, which in this case is almost everywhere, get adjusted. But the higher colors almost retain their color. So what you want to do, to make this easy on yourself, you want to click the negative eye drop and click on the darkest part on the scene, which is about right here. That will attempt to negate all of the color from that area, which makes this almost a perfect black. Now for your midtones, this will convert anything of mid-luminance and change their color. The mid wheel is more of a personal preference, so since this is like a warm ink space, I'm going to make this more of an orange tone. Now that we have that, we can switch to our high tones, which takes anything bright and changes it ever so slightly. Let's go to a different part of the frame where we have brighter bits, like these lights here. Now you can see that the chandelier is orange, but the light is almost white color. So let's just adjust the light on that back to its orange counterpart. There we go. Now there's some sliders down below here. Saturation, of course, increases the saturation of the image, while 0 being monochromatic. Your gamma will basically put a white sheen over everything if it's up, and a black sheen if it's down. Gain increases the brightness of bright parts, and doesn't really increase the brightness of dark parts as much. And offset will almost do the same thing as gamma. Now we can move on to our secondary color corrector. What this does, it applies a colored film over everything. So again, since this is a orange ink space, like a warm tone, we're going to slide this ever so slightly to the orange. Quick tip: holding control while in these wheels will make you move a lot slower. I'm noticing that things that should be pretty bright are not as bright, so let's try cranking up the saturation by 0.2. That does it. So now let's take a look at our scene. Pay attention to over here. Looks pretty good. Now let's move on to color grading. Again, we have to get a white balance. So let's go back to that same snare drum. Grab a white balance and turn it on. Now, the color grading menu can be accessed by clicking on the item in the timeline and pressing Alt-G, or pressing this button right here. Keep in mind that these tools are only available to Sony Vegas Pro 18 and 17. Now you can see a lot of stuff just popped up on screen. You have a waveform, which takes the brightness of the image, flips it vertically, and projects the brighter parts up. So you can see that we have lights here. These are going up since they're brighter. And the darker parts in the middle of the frame are a lot darker, so they're at 0. Let's reset everything by double-clicking it. And let's start fresh. First off, with color grading, you want to take your lift slider and you want to get this bar as close to 0 as you need. So there we go. Then you can see that these parts are supposed to be pretty bright since they're very bright lights. So you take your gain, hold control, and slide it so it's about at 100. That'll do since this is a relatively dark scene. And then if your black levels lift up a little bit, go to your gamma, slide it down. And now you're ready to color. Using lift on color grading is the same as color correction. You want to negate the blacks by doing the opposite of your current black levels. So let's go back to that first part. You can see how the blacks are a lot of blue. So let's bring this over to orange until you can eyeball it. That looks about right. Keep in mind that this is a way more sensitive system, so you're going to need to hold control for this. Already you can see a big difference has happened. Now your gamma, you want to sort of do this in the opposite direction to give it a more contrasty look. So we did about a diagonal line here. So let's go down here ever so slightly. You may need to adjust your lift just a little bit to make the gamma work. There we go. Now on to gain. This can be a personal preference. I like to always set it to a little bit of green for a more serious tone. And then your offset, this is like your secondary color corrector over again. Set this to the tone you want, ever so slightly. And there you go. You now have your graded image. As you can see, it looks a lot better than the color correction, mainly because the color correctors apply a bit of a haze over everything. And we can see on this shot here how the color correction doesn't really maintain the light level of the neon light back here, but the color grading definitely retains that. Though this does all come down to a personal preference of use. That's about it for now. Stay tuned for next episode where we talk about sound.